Hello, and welcome to my channel. Try This as a series breaking down a certain game or playstyle of a game. Today we're going to be talking Commander and bringing down Captain Nagaathrod. The video is broken down into chapters which you can find in the description or in the timeline. I'll be briefly covering the Captain, then cover some win conditions and how we'll get there. I'll talk about some mana base and card draw strategies. I'll discuss other synergistic cards in the deck and why I think they'll help. I'll cover some other cards I cut from my example list, why they didn't fit my list but they might fit yours. And finally I'll be moving on to some budget suggestions for the deck. If you enjoy this content, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It really helps other viewers discover the content I produce and is a great way to show support. With that said, let's dive in. Captain Nagaathrod is a 3/6 horror pirate that costs 3 blue-black. He gives horrors you control menace. Also, whenever a horror you control deals combat damage to the player, that player mills that many cards. At the beginning of your end step, choose target artifact or creature card in an opponent's graveyard that was put there from their library this turn and put it onto the battlefield under your control. This is an interesting mill thief commander that is a solid leader of the horror tribe. Umbris was already pretty terrifying at the helm of this tribe, but I think Captain Nagaathrod is actually just as powerful, though in a different way. Being able to steal artifacts and creatures from what we milled is a very powerful effect. Milling Dimir is pretty easy to pull off, as well as other reanimation and thief effects. We can build a list around this commander following any of these themes, but I'm going to focus on horror tribal in my video and example list. Enabling the tribe will naturally play into the other themes anyway. Menace is actually kind of an obnoxious keyword. It really isn't that strong when we're talking about 1 or 2 creatures having it. However, when most if not all of your creatures have it, then it's very powerful and difficult to deal with. A quick note before we get started, it is important to remember that the artifact and creature we can steal with our commander has to come from among cards we've milled our opponents for on our turn. Milling our opponents on their turns doesn't provide us with any additional value except for playing into that win condition. I think my favorite part about Captain Nagaathrod is that similar to Evelyn, we can just jam out creatures in our tribe for amazing value. Horrors are a surprisingly good tribe, and the value our commander provides can not only deny our opponent's value but add to our own. Mill is a pretty easy win condition for this deck, but I'm not going to focus on it completely. I think between combat damage and our thief effects on our commander, we should be able to beat down our opponents for the win. If it's looking like combat damage won't be an option, then we should still be able to mill them out. Cards like Consuming Aberration can enable either win condition for us. As a huge creature with menace, we can potentially deal a ton of damage to our opponents while also enabling mill as a backup plan. Similarly, the Haunt of Hightower can beat down our opponents. Though it doesn't belong with the tribe, it does synergize with their capabilities in this deck. Phoenix, Bruvac, and Maddening Cacophony are all cards that can enable our mill backup strategy. I think it's more likely we'll win in combat, but like I said, we can easily use mill as a backup plan. Though the horrors do a pretty good job at milling on their own, I think adding other mill effects is needed. It is possible that we don't have any opportunities to swing out, so we need some extra mill effects to keep our deck from stalling out. As a disclaimer, the mana base in this deck isn't as aggressive as it probably should be. Since we can steal artifacts with our commander, we can actually just steal mana rocks from our opponents once he's out. In my test games I didn't have any real issues with mana, but it's important to note we can sort of use our commander for ramp if needed. Starting off is my auto includes in Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, and Thematic Compass. I've always found Thematic Compass to be a reliable card at any point in the game. It can help ensure land drops in early to mid game and then flip into a strictly better maze of it to protect us from Voltron commanders and other problem creatures. Solemn Simulacrum and Wayfarer's Bauble are 2 solid cards that can fetch us basic lands to the field. I'm running Leaden Mirror, Ornithopter of Paradise, and Silvermere as additional mana dorks to advance our board state. Felwar Stone, Exotic Orchard, and Nykthos can give us a range of mana. This can be useful to activate abilities of creatures or artifacts we steal that don't match our mana base. Though Nykthos is mostly here for the devotion and our colors, it could generate colors for whatever we steal to activate those abilities. Last is Kirk, Son of Yawgmoth. This isn't technically a ramp spell, but turning our black mana pips into Phyrexian mana is a super powerful effect. This can significantly impact our mana base by making our black spells just cost some life and their generic mana costs. Being a horror, he also synergizes with our commander and our other strategies. I'm adding some staples in Rhystic Study, Binding of Thassa, and Kindred Discovery for card draw. Rhystic Study is just a legendary card that's an auto-include in any blue deck. Binding of Thassa synergizes so well with our combat-centric deck. With most of our creatures having menace, we should have plenty of opportunities to draw cards. Since we're running a tribal deck, Kindred Discovery just makes sense also. It's strictly better than the Bind It since we don't even need the Connect to draw cards. I'm running Grazilax, Illithid Scholar, Wharf Infiltrator, and Forgotten Creation for some added card draw. The Scholar is a slightly worse version of Binding of Thassa, but all the same should give us opportunities to draw cards. It can also bounce our Horrors if we're swinging into an unfavorable trade. The other two cards are a little less efficient, but Forgotten Creation can give us a personal windfall, which could be nice if we're stalling out. Court of Cunning can also enable our commander's ability if we can't swing out. It introduces Monarch into the game for some added card draw. With our creatures having Menace, it should be pretty easy in most cases to get back if we want it. Since we can steal our opponent's creatures with our commander's ability, I'm going to be running Maskwood Nexus and Arcane Adaptation as two cards that will turn them into horrors. This will help us snowball our commander's ability and aggressively push towards either of our win conditions. We can also dump some extra mana into Maskwood to create extra horrors for us to swing out with. Since we're focusing on damage, Mindcrate can effectively double up how much our creatures will mill. This is another card to play into our backup win condition in case we can't put out enough pressure in combat. I'm running Lithoform Engine and Strionic Resonator to double up the end step trigger on our commander. This way we can get some additional artifacts and creatures. Since he can only choose one thing among the cards that are milled on the same turn, I feel like both of these cards are needed to make the most of that ability. Curse of Unbinding doesn't really synergize with our commander, but it does fit the mill and thief themes in general. It can be an effective curse that can mill out low creature decks if you're familiar with your opponent's list. I'm running Spark Double and both Sakashimas to copy our commander, our scary horrors, or anything we might steal. I think ideally we'd copy Nagothrod as we can get additional end step triggers and mill effects. I'm running Umbris as another creature that synergizes with our tribe. This creature doesn't really synergize with our commander's ability since things go into exile, but it fits into our mill and beatdown themes. Whispersill Cloak can not only provide protection to one of our creatures, but can ensure we always get some mill effects for our commander. Ravenous Chupacabra and Phyrexian Obliterator are two cards that can remove some of our opponent's permanents. The Obliterator is a flexible card with a scary effect that most of our opponents will try to avoid. This makes it an effective attacker and an effective blocker if we need to focus on defense. Toxrill and Sludge Monster are two more horrors that have pseudo removal effects. Toxrill can be a really oppressive card that can ensure we have free swings into our opponents if it sticks around. Lightning Greaves, Swiftfoot Boots, and Spellskite are all cards that can protect our creatures. Spellskite being a horror synergizes with some of our effects, though it won't mill anything being a 0-power creature. The cutting room floor is where I talk about some cards around or over $10 at the time of recording that I cut from my list for various reasons but are worth mentioning to run. Though these cards didn't find a home in my list, they might find a home in yours. For some added thief effects, you could run Praetor's Grasp and Opposition Agent. The Gothrod's effect was enough for me even with only taking one thing per turn. I didn't really want to focus on stealing cards for this deck, and it was just a nice bonus. Ancient Brass Dragon doesn't really fit our tribe, but it does synergize with our mill theme. Having the ability to recur a bunch of random stuff is great. These new Ancient Dragons are all good in their own right, and this one allowing us to choose any number of things from any number of graveyards is fantastic in any mill deck. I cut it because I thought a 7 CMC creature that didn't fit the tribe was a tough include. I wanted to focus on horrors and combat damage for this deck, and something like Haunt of Hightower fit better with the theme I was going with. However, I think this dragon would find a good home in this list. Urza's Incubator is a good tribal card to reduce the cost of our creatures. I cut it in favor of other cards like Maskwood and Lithoform Engine to help synergize with our strategies. I didn't have too much of an issue with casting my creatures, however there are quite a few expensive horrors in this deck and having some cost reduction cards would be welcome. For some added ramp, I'd recommend Burnished Heart and Hedron Crawler. Both are cheap cards that can easily advance our board state. Jace's Archivist, Curse of Verbosity, and Windfall are some great budget ways to draw cards. With all the attacking we're going to do, the Curse really fits into the deck's strategy. The Archivist and Windfall are just two cards that can reset our hands and force some draws if our opponents are close to milling out. Agent of Treachery is a notable thief card if you want to build into more of the thief theme. Dimir is really good at stealing cards, so I'm not going to go through all the budget options for thief effects. I'll add a link to the Dimir Thief EDHREC page if you like some more suggestions for cards that fit this theme. Imprison in the Moon is a great blue removal spell. It can be kind of mean to get a commander with it, but it's a really effective card against problem creatures. Being able to hit planeswalkers and lands is also a great bonus. Herald's Horn is another great cost reduction card that can also give us some card advantage throughout the game. With most of our creatures being horrors, we should get plenty of value from this card. I didn't cover every card in this deck or every suggestion I have for Captain Nagothrod, so if you'd like to see the rest, check out the deck list in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider clicking the like button and subscribing to the channel. Comment below on cards you think synergize well with this commander, and if you have any suggestions for commanders to build in the future. Thank you so much for watching, good luck, and have fun.